The airport was alive with sound, the hum of rolling suitcases, the laughter of families reuniting, the impatient sighs of travelers staring at boarding screens. Amid the movement, an elderly man stood completely still. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched his boarding pass, eyes fixed on gate 23. Arthur Bennett, 74, wasn't one to believe in signs or destiny anymore. Life had taught him that some stories don't get happy endings. Yet something in his chest stirred as he looked toward the waiting area, that old, unshakable ache that once came with love lost but never forgotten. He had flown from Boston to Seattle to visit his son, but the truth was deeper. He was chasing ghosts, the memory of a woman named Evelyn Carter, the only person who ever made time stand still. 40 years had passed since he last saw her, since that rainy afternoon in 1985 when he'd watched her taxi disappear down the street, her hand pressed to the window, her eyes full of tears she never let fall. He never married. He said he was too busy building his company, but in truth, no one else ever felt right. No one laughed like she did. No one called him Artie the way she did, soft but certain, like she owned the name. The boarding call for Flight 218 echoed through the terminal. Arthur sat down in the waiting area, breathing through the ache in his knees. He looked up, and his heart stopped. Across from him sat a woman with silver hair tied in a neat bun, reading a small, worn-out paperback. The cover was faded, but he knew that book, Pride and Prejudice. It had been her favorite. She looked up, sensing someone's gaze, and their eyes met. For a moment, both froze. The noise of the airport faded. "Evelyn," he whispered, disbelief breaking in his voice. Her lips parted. The book slipped from her fingers. Arthur Bennett. 40 years collapsed into that single second. They just stared. Two lives that had traveled separate roads, now circling back to where they once began. They sat together, neither knowing what to say first. "You haven't changed much," he said, his voice trembling with a mix of humor and awe. She smiled softly. "You still lie badly, Artie." He chuckled, a sound that surprised them both, because it was the same laugh that used to make her heart skip. "I thought you moved to Chicago," he said. "I did, married, had 2 children, lost my husband 5 years ago. Cancer." Arthur's eyes softened. "I'm sorry." She nodded. "And you?" He sighed. "Never married. I suppose I was waiting for something I'd already lost." Her gaze dropped, and for a moment, silence stretched between them, not awkward, but full. They talked for nearly an hour, like two old souls catching up with themselves. They spoke of the past, of their first date by the riverside, the promise they made to chase dreams together, and the moment it all broke when Arthur had to move for work, and she stayed behind to care for her sick mother. Letters were written, but life got in the way. Then came years of silence. And now, 40 years later, here they were, at an airport gate, still waiting for flights going in opposite directions. When the final boarding call came, Evelyn reached for her ticket. "Los Angeles," she said softly. "My daughter just had a baby. I'm going to meet my granddaughter." Arthur smiled. "That's wonderful." He looked down at his own ticket. "Seattle." They both laughed, at how life still insisted on sending them to different places. But then, as Evelyn stood, her hand brushed against his. It was a brief, trembling touch, yet it carried decades of memories. "Do you ever think about what could have been?" she asked quietly. "Every single day," Arthur replied. Her eyes glistened. "Me too." Before she could say more, the gate agent called her name. She took a step toward the jet bridge, then stopped, turned, and said something that would change both their lives. "I almost didn't take this flight. Something told me to wait in the lounge instead. I think, maybe I was supposed to see you again." Arthur's throat tightened. "Then maybe this isn't the end, Evelyn." She smiled through tears. "Maybe it's not." When her flight departed, Arthur sat alone by the window, watching the plane ascend into the clouds. He felt both full and hollow, like he'd been given a gift only to lose it again. But then he noticed something. The book she had been reading lay on the chair beside him. Pride and Prejudice. He opened it and found a folded note inside. Her handwriting, still elegant, still hers. It read, "Artie, if we ever met again, I wanted you to know something. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single year. Maybe life took us different ways, but my heart always kept a little space for you. If you ever find this note, call me. My number hasn't changed, it's written below. Eve." Tears blurred his vision as he read her name. He looked up, heart pounding. 3 weeks later, a knock echoed through Evelyn's home in Los Angeles. She opened the door, and gasped. There stood Arthur, holding her old book and a bouquet of daisies, the same flowers he had brought her on their very first date. I missed my connecting flight, he said, smiling gently. Figured I might as well catch a different one, to you. Her eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth, trembling. Artie, he stepped forward, taking her hand, the same hand that once slipped away from him on a rainy street decades ago. I don't want to lose you again, he whispered. Not this time. Evelyn's tears fell freely now, but they were tears of joy. Then don't, she said simply. He smiled. I won't. The ending, and the message. In the months that followed, Arthur and Evelyn became inseparable. They spent mornings walking along the beach, afternoons visiting family, and evenings reminiscing over old songs and photographs. They didn't speak much about the 40 years they lost, they spoke instead about the time they still had. One sunset, as they sat on a bench watching the sky turn gold, Evelyn said softly, "Do you think love can wait that long?" Arthur looked at her, eyes glistening. It didn't wait. It lived. Quietly, in both of us. We just had to find it again. She leaned her head on his shoulder, smiling. Then I'm glad we did. He kissed her forehead gently. So am I. In a world where people often move too fast, forget too easily, and love too briefly, Arthur and Evelyn's story became a quiet reminder that some loves don't fade with time. They simply wait, patiently, for the right moment to return. And sometimes, that moment just happens to be at an airport gate.